Meadows of the righteous, 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 meadows of the righteous.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya'i wal Mursaleen amma ba'd fa'udhu billahi minash shaytanir rajim bismillahir rahmanir rahim as-salatu wa salamu alayka ya Rasulullah wa ala alika wa ashabika ya Habiballah as-salatu wa salamu alayka ya Nabiyallah wa ala alika wa ashabika ya Nurallah. We welcome you to a new set of episodes which will cover many topics including daily life matters and etiquettes, social etiquettes and spiritual morals, and many other Madani pearls, words of wisdom we will learn during these episodes. We hope you watch all of these episodes and learn and develop our Islamic lifestyle. Indeed, one of the most noble and virtuous teachings of Islam from Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the action, or moreover the practice of making a good intention. What is an intention? The intention is a clear determination of the heart. When your heart is set upon something, a clear determination that I say, I'm set to do this and I'm going to do it. That's what an intention is. And your heart must fully accept and have this determination, this inspiration that I am going to do this, and he is firm upon that intention. One of the most famous teachings in Islam, one of the most famous lessons from the teachings of the final Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is where he said, "Innamal a'malu bin niyat," that actions are indeed based upon intentions. Now the story goes that a man from Mecca in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, he proposed to a woman from Medina, and she accepted the proposal, but on one condition. And that condition was that that man moves from Mecca into Medina. Now, when the Muslims migrated from Mecca and they went towards Madinatul Munawwarah, loads of them went from Mecca into Medina, and they entered from one blessed land into the other blessed land. Upon reaching Madinatul Munawwarah, the Prophet ﷺ stood up and delivered a sermon, and history remembers this sermon. This sermon became such a center point of this religion that even today, over 1400 years later, we are still speaking them very words that Hazrat Umar ibn al-Khattab narrated. He said, "Innamal a'malu bin niyat." So the Prophet ﷺ stood up and gave this sermon, and he said that actions are indeed based upon intention. "Innama likulli imri'in ma nawa." A man will only attain what he intended. So you have to understand that the Muslims migrated with the Prophet ﷺ from Mecca to Medina. Now what was the reward of this? What was the result of this? The Prophet ﷺ stood up and delivered this sermon. He said the actions are based upon intention. So if you migrated with a good intention, your action is based upon that. And a man will only attain what he intended. So if he intended to migrate with me for the sake of Islam, then he has attained that virtue. So the Prophet ﷺ then elaborates, he says, فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ, that whosoever's hijrat, migration, was sincerely for the sake of Allah and His Rasul, فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ, then he has attained Allah and His Rasul. Yani he has fulfilled that intention that he had made to migrate for the sake of Allah. Allah and His Rasul commanded the believers to migrate. Whoever intended to migrate for this intention, with this intention, firm determination from the heart, they attain the pleasure of Allah and His Rasul. وَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ لِدُنْيَا يُصِيبُهَا أَوْ إِمْرَأَةٍ يَنْكِحُهَا, whomsoever's migration was for the sake of the dunya, for a worldly purpose, or a woman that he intended to marry, فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى مَا هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِ, his migration will be based upon the thing that he migrated for. Now this sermon was a very famous sermon after the migration of Rasul alayhi salam, and it leaves this sincerity, or it left this sincerity amongst the believers forever. Now when you do something, you do it for the sake of Allah and His Rasul. You do not do it for any other purpose. The priority is you do something for the sake of Allah and His Rasul. However, doing something for the sake of the world, so if a person embarks on a journey from here to another destination for the sake of business, or for the sake of meeting a friend, or for the sake of eating some food, or for the sake of any permissible action, that's allowed. It's not a negative action to do. But if you was to make a good intention, so this person who migrated from Makkah to Medina, even though he went with the people or the migrators, his intention wasn't the same as the people who migrated. The people who migrated from Makkah to Medina, they were given glad tidings. They were called the Muhajirun, the migrators. Allah praised them, the Rasul praised them. This person lost out from that noble virtue. And this was a lesson for us, that when you do something, you do it for the sake of Allah and His Rasul, and not for your own purpose. And there's a big benefit, inshallah, we will cover this within this episode, that why should we do something for the sake of Allah and His Rasul? So, from day to day, we perform many actions throughout our life. Allah has blessed this nation to perform good intentions, to make a permissible action full of reward. So you could, just by merely going to sleep with the intention that I am going to wake up for Fajr, that amal, that action of sleeping was based upon the niyyah. If a person now, if you could take it one step further, a person goes to sleep in the state of wudu, this is even more benefiting him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses that person. If he makes the intention that I'm going to wake up for tahajjud, this is rewarded. So this is a very blessed virtue Islam has given the follower. A basic example of making a good intention. And it's very important, day to day we do certain things where if we fail on our intention, it could be detrimental to our faith. A basic example is when a person gives charity now, especially the Muslim community, in certain seasons of the year, we step forward and we give charity, and we want to help people around in our community. We want to serve the madrasa, we want to help people. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us the blessings, the Prophet has told us the blessings of giving sadaqah, charity. Now, when a person goes to give charity without any virtuous intention, he only loses his money. A person takes money out of his pocket and puts it onto the shelf. What he has done, he has just transferred that money from one place to another. He hasn't gained no reward. Now, in between that action, if he had made the intention that I am putting this money in this box, a donation box for example, or I'm putting this money in this person's place so that he could receive it as a gift, as a sadaqah, when he makes that intention, that sincere intention, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward him for that numerously, up to 700 times depending on how solid his intention was. So sadaqah is or any action like that is, in my words, dry if there is no intention. The action is not, you're not receiving the full efficiency of that action if you've got no intention. So intention makes that action the most efficient action. So if he did not make good intention whilst giving that sadaqah, he has just lost money. Had he have made noble intentions that with this money, halal rizq that Allah has sustained me with, I'm going to pass it on to the poorer person, implementing the verses of the Quran, acting upon the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward him. And in the Quran it states up to 700 times. The Mufassirun have mentioned it depends on how strong his intention was, how sincere his intention was. But now, that's a positive intention, that you're giving it for the sake of Allah and His Rasul. But if you put a negative intention in that, you do something for the sake of showing off, you give charity to, this person's a rich man, he's a generous person, people are going to talk about him. If you're going to give charity for that reason, now this is detrimental. Now you're showing off. Now you've not only just lost the money, but you've attained a sin. You've attained a sin. It was better for you to not give that charity. So intention is a very, very important point. There's a hadith sharif. The Prophet ﷺ says that in Allah kataba al-hasanat wa sayyi'at, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has destined good and bad. Then he's clarified what these good and bads are. فَمَنْ هَمَّ بِحَسَنَةٍ فَلَمْ يَعْمَلْهَا كَتَبَهَا اللَّهُ تَبَارَكَ وَتَعَالَى عِنْدَهُ حَسَنَةً كَامِلَةً فَمَنْ هَمَّ بِحَسَنَةٍ, whoever thinks of doing a good deed, Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala commands the angel, the right angel, to write down the deed already, even though he's not done it. He's just intended, right? And Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala commands the angel, write that down. وَإِنْ هَمَّ بِهَا فَعَمِلَهَا كَتَبَهَا اللَّهُ عَشْرَ حَسَنَاتٍ إِلَى 700 ضِعْفٍ. Now if he intends it, and then he steps forward and does that action, Allah makes the angel write that deed down from 10 all the way up to 700 times, depending on his intention. إِلَىٰ أَضْعَافٍ كَثِيرًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could multiply that many times over. وَإِنْ هَمَّ بِسَيِّئَةٍ فَلَمْ يَعْمَلْهَا كَتَبَهَا اللَّهُ عِنْدَهُ حَسَنَةً كَامِلَةً. That a person, if he intends to do a bad deed, is thinking of committing a sin, but he doesn't do it, Allah Azza wa Jalla still writes a good deed. He intended to do a sin, he didn't do the sin. Allah Azza wa Jalla, for not doing that sin, He tells the angel, write down a good deed. This is how merciful Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. وَإِنْ هَمَّ بِهَا فَعَمِلَهَا كَتَبَهَا اللَّهُ سَيِّئَةً وَاحِدَةً. If he intends it and then carries out that action, so he thinks of doing the bad deed and then he does the bad action as well, God forbid, ma'adallah, Allah writes down one bad deed. So if you do a good deed, you make an intention, I'll summarize the narration, make an intention to do a good deed, you don't carry it out, you get the good deed. You carry the action out, Allah Azza wa Jalla rewards you from 10 up to 700 depending on your intention. You intend to do a bad deed, you don't do it, Allah writes down a good deed. The only case you get written down a bad deed is if you make the intention and do it as well. You make the intention and you do it. That is the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's how important niyat is as well. Niyat is in the center point of Islam. The story of 3 men. There's an amazing story where 3 men were walking. The Prophet ﷺ narrates this. They went on a journey together. And whilst they were on this journey, they took a pit stop, a rest. They were resting in this cave. Whilst they were resting, it started to rain. When it started to rain, thunder, the weather went quite severe. And what happened was the mouth of the cave became blocked, or they were trapped in, because the mouth of the cave, a massive boulder, just kind of attached itself onto the mouth of the cave. And there was no way these guys had enough strength to move that boulder that was trapping them from leaving that cave. And they turned around and they said, look, there is no way we can leave this cave. The only one that could help us here is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No one else can hear us, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they decided that what we'll do is we will think of a good deed that we done that was sincerely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And by wasila, by means of that good deed, we will present that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, Ya Allah Azza wa Jalla, for the sake of this deed, that I did allow this stone to move so we could leave and be free. So there were three men, and the first man, he stepped forward and he said that, Ya Allah Azza wa Jalla, I would feed my parents milk every night before sleeping. And that one night, you know better about it, that one night when I went out into the fields to take milk from the animals, for a certain reason it took me extra time to take milk. And because I took extra time, when I came back, my parents were asleep. And when they were asleep, my children were crying and they wanted to drink the milk. But my practice was that I would feed my parents before feeding anyone else. And I stood there, I didn't wake them up. But I stood beside their bed the entire night so they could wake up and drink this milk. And I done this sincerely for the sake of you alone. Ya Allah, by virtue of this good deed, that pure intention that I had whilst performing this good deed, Ya Allah, move this stone. Amazingly, the Prophet ﷺ told us this story. Amazingly, the stone, the boulder moved. A certain portion of the cave, which was insufficient for them to move and leave, that was showing there was a gap in the mouth of the cave. So the second man, he stood up and he said, Ya Allah Azza wa Jalla, there was that one time when that woman that I loved my entire life, I was attracted to her my entire life, and I tried to get her attention all my life. And there was this one time, in a time of famine, where she was desperate and she needed some financial support. So she came to me and asked me for some help, and I gave her the financial support. And when I gave her the financial support, I gave it her on one condition. That condition was that she allows me, or she hands herself over to me. And at a time of great desire, after a long period of time, in that moment, whilst I was about to fulfill my desire, my evil desires, she turned around and said to me, do you not fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Ya Allah, for your sake, the intention, my intention, sincerely because of you, no other reason, I left that woman. I left her. I didn't fulfill my desire for your sake. My intention was pure. Ya Allah, and plus I did not take that money back as well. For your sake, Ya Allah, I stopped doing that sin that I was about to do. Ya Allah, allow this boulder to move. The boulder moved again slightly, but it wasn't sufficient for them to get out. So the third man, he stood up. He said, Ya Allah, I had 3 laborers working for me. They work day and night, they're doing their job, they're doing a good job. And I paid 2 of them. The third one, I wasn't able to pay him because he had left before I could get hold of him. So I had no other option, Ya Allah, for the sake of you, I took his portion of money, his cut, I invested it into a business. That business grew. You put barakah in that business, and that business flourished. Many years later, that man came back to me and said, look, you owe me my wage from that time. And Ya Allah, I could have kept his, just give him that money that I owed him. But I turned around and said, look, this entire business is yours. And he said, are you mocking me? Are you having a laugh with me? He said, no, I'm being serious. I invested your money. And this is all from the investment that I made from your wage. So this is yours, you keep that. He said, Ya Allah, I was truthful for your sake. My intention was clean for your sake. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loved this action so much that that boulder moved suddenly, like immediately, the boulder moved. They were free. Prophet ﷺ told us this. That was there. When they done them actions, their intention was pure. That tells us, that teaches us a lesson. The more clean, pure your intention is, the more power and strength you have. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens ways for you in life depending on how pure your intention is. It all depends on how strong and pure your intention is. And a general psychological benefit of having or making the right intention. Sometimes we do things to impress people. Is that the right intention? Sometimes we do things for the wrong reasons. Even though the action is virtuous, we do it for the wrong reason. For example, you make a cup of tea. Your friends come over, you make a cup of tea. And you make this cup of tea, you put effort in it, you warm it up, you put milk in, sugar in, you give it a good stir. In the end, when you present that tea to your friend or your relative, whoever it is, even though you put all that effort in, now it could be a tray of food, it could be anything. You made a dish for them, you made a pie for them or something. You put all that effort in, and your one intention was that when he eats it, he's gonna love it, right? You put all that effort in, all that intention, right? You put all that effort in making that food, that time you put in to make that food, and your one intention was that when he eats it, he's gonna say, "Wow, you're a proper cook." But now this intention is faulty. Why? Because supposedly that person, if he takes a bite or if he takes a sip of your tea, and God forbid he spits it out and he finds it disgusting for some reason, God forbid, that's gonna hurt you. You put all that effort, time, money, effort, everything into that. Your intentions you think your intention was good, but psychologically what's happened is him not liking that food or showing resentment. Ma aba Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ta'aman, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam never ever found defects in food. If he liked it, he would eat it. If he didn't like it, he would leave it. But that person, suppose he didn't like it, suppose he just didn't want it, that's gonna hurt you. That's gonna hurt you, because the reason why you made that tea or that food or whatever it was to impress him, to get reward from him. He didn't give it you. So all that effort you put in has gone to waste, and it's hurt you, and you're gonna remember that. You're gonna remember that. Psychologically, it's damaged you. However, if you change your intention and you said that I'm gonna make this food, right, I'm gonna put all my effort in, and all this effort is for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The thing is here, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most superior, He is the Azim, He is the greatest ever. You would put more effort into making that food even better. You would put extra namak, march and masala on it, salt and pepper and different herbs. And when you stir the tea, you stir it with more passion because you're doing it for Allah and His Rasul. And you will be rewarded for just making that intention. And now so suppose he liked it, then it's a win-win situation. Suppose he didn't like it. You wouldn't walk away thinking, I'm heartbroken. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has accepted it. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has accepted it. So there is benefit in just making the right intention. Now if you didn't like it, you're not going to walk away with a broken heart. You're not going to be mentally broken. You're going to walk away thinking, you know what, I've got my reward anyway. My reward is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He will reward me. I don't need this person's reward. Just to make you understand the psychology of making a good intention, it saves you from a lot of mental issues. So making the right intention is very, very important. And I think it goes down to the fact that, you see, man will always break your heart. Allah and His Rasul never break your heart. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mends hearts, fixes hearts, brings people together. He is the compassionate. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says that Inna Allah la yanzuru ila ajsamikum wala ila suwarikum walakin yanzuru ila qulubikum wa a'malikum. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't look towards your body. وَلَكِنْ يَنْظُرُ إِلَىٰ قُلُوبِكُمْ. He looks at your heart, what your intention is. وَأَعْمَالِكُمْ, and your actions. We shouldn't walk around trying to impress the people. We shouldn't do things just for people to say, wow. We should do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We should do things for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this will help us in all points in life. There are many other places, times where we should make good intentions. For example, when a person wakes up, he should make this intention that for the entire day I'm gonna spend in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When he performs wuzu, he's going to perform wuzu for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When he goes towards work, he should make this intention: I see any Muslim, I'm going to give him salam, I'm going to greet him, I'm going to smile at him. Right? If I see something negative, I'm going to lower my gaze. If someone's talking wrong, I'm going to mute my ears. If there's something that's not right, I'm going to try and make it right. Right? So if you make these intentions, right? If you're going to the masjid, I'm going to go to the masjid because of fulfilling the farz, and then it's wajib to read with jama'at. I'm going to visit, I'm going to meet the imam. If I have enough ability, I'm going to put a few pounds in the sadaqah box, and we should do that. Making these intentions, now on each footstep you're getting multiple rewards. A person can go to the masjid just with one intention, that I'm going to read namaz, or he could make 40 intentions before leaving. And the saints of Islam, they would do that. They would make 40 intentions before leaving towards the masjid. And they would recite these, they'd have them memorized, that I'm going to do this, and on each step, rather than one reward, they would get 40 rewards. This is one of the unique blessings of Islam. So, when we do an action in our day-to-day life, we must make good intentions. But that's not the end. It's not just a good intention. You perform the action and you continuously perform that action all the way up until the end, because the action is judged from the start and the end. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards the rest. Sallu ala al-Habib sallallahu ala Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
Meadows of the righteous, 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 meadows of the righteous.